Lakeya McGill is one of our K-12 scholars. She and Todd Griffin, who I think is her patient partner, are going to really run the next session on involving PWLEs in their research. Lakeya?
What's going on, everybody? Hope everyone's having a good time. It's a great conference so far. It's my first time here. It's been great. You know. Where did Chris go? Chris went, I don't know where she went, actually. She stepped out. She ran away. But I would take out one of their USBs.
Okay, so hi, everyone. So we're going to be talking about partnering with persons with lived experience. We're going to start with introductions about ourselves. Then we're going to talk about best practices for engagement, both with people with lived experience and communities. We're going to talk about sickle cell disease as an example, and then we're going to end with the conclusion and resources. So my name is Lakeya McGill. I use she, her pronouns. I'd like to start with a description of myself. So I'm a Black woman with dark hair. I'm wearing glasses, and I'm wearing a floral shirt. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Pittsburgh in the School of Medicine, and I'm a clinical and community psychologist by training. As a community psychologist, what that means is that I'll often think about the impact of the environment, the community, and engaging with them to improve health outcomes. I was born and raised in a rural community in Tennessee that's called Lexington. That's about 7,000 people and is both 2 hours from both Memphis and Nashville. I enjoy many things, particularly I like sports, basketball, women's basketball, as well as jigsaw puzzles, and I'm starting to get into Legos. My research focuses on sickle cell disease, pain, and health equity, making sure that everyone receives the care and the resources that they need. And then also my family is important to me. So this is a picture of my mom, my dad, my brother, my husband, my grandfather and a cousin, my in-laws, including my granny, and then this is me with my in-laws and my brother and my husband. I like to start by sharing who I am because who I am impacts everything, including my clinical work, my research, the questions that I ask, how I interpret what I find. And so as I shared with you, my family are important to me as well as my friend and colleagues. I'm a Black woman with an invisible disability, born and raised in a working class family. I'm also a first generation college graduate, and I do not live with sickle cell disease. However, many people important to me live with chronic pain.
Hello, everyone. My name is Todd Griffin. I am a research coordinator and health coach with the University of Pittsburgh, and I'm also a sickle cell warrior. So a little bit about me. I was born in 2000, and I was born in Pittsburgh, PA, the 412, and I was actually misdiagnosed with sickle cell trait. So my dad, who has the sickle cell trait, and my mom, who has the thalassemia trait, when I was born, it was actually misscreened as just a trait. So for the first 11 years of my life, I was going through so many difficulties, trials, and tribulations with my health as far as, what's going on. They were saying I was having growing pains. I'm 5'4", Lakeya, we're like the same height. I don't know how much growing I was doing, but it wasn't much. So I was a little confused. However, when I was properly diagnosed with sickle beta thalassemia plus, my world just really opened up, and I was able to, as we'll talk about in a little bit further, I was able to partner with the Children's Sickle Cell Foundation of Pittsburgh, which is a nonprofit organization that helps children and their families all throughout adulthood to give them resources and aid for whatever they may need for them and their families. And now, currently, 2025, I live with sickle cell. I live well with sickle cell, and I'm doing what I love, including advocating, DJing, acting, and more. So, yeah. A little bit more about who I am. I'm an advocate with lived experience. I'm a former peer navigator and also a community health worker. That kind of goes into what my job is now as a health coach, but a peer navigator, I joined with the Children's Sickle Cell Foundation when I was 17, and I joined as a peer navigator to help younger individuals within the nonprofit, to tell them it's okay to take your medicine. It's okay to listen to your mom and put that coat on and do the things that you're supposed to do to properly manage your diagnoses. And that turned into me getting the knowledge and the funding through the Children's Sickle Cell Foundation to get the training I needed to become a community health worker and to further help and engage in my community. And that's where my journey kind of started with impacting my community. As you can see here in some of the pictures here, I love and am a big proponent of creating safe, supportive spaces and open-minded spaces where people can come together and learn about one another, build communal engaging areas where they can just be themselves. As a DJ and MC, I love to house those spaces where I can develop and build areas where we can share our stories, share our visions, and to really be a proponent of marginalized voices so they can share theirs and feel empowered for who they are and how they live their lives. And youth and family engagement is a big thing for me. And as you can see in my pictures, in the left-hand corner, that's me and another kid from the Children's Sickle Cell Foundation. I was actually volunteering at a camp called Flying Horse Farms, which is a camp for kids with serious illnesses. And we were actually putting on shower caps to, make everyone feel comfortable because the girls had to wear shower caps. And that was because we had a paint party, and they felt a little bit embarrassed about having to put on these shower caps. But I said, you know what? We ain't gonna feel that way. We're gonna all join in on this. And, I had to put on my shower cap, let them know I'm about it. I'm about it. And we had a great time. And that's just what I mean, just a little example of, just going that extra step can really make kids or anybody in your community feel really welcome and engaged. In the right, that's me DJing with a nonprofit called Open Up Yoga Studio in Pittsburgh. And we partner with young adults, and they usually have mobility issues and or IDD. And we have inclusive ballet, inclusive yoga, and we throw a party every month so they can come together, have a great time, and just celebrate. And then bottom left-hand corner is me with one of my cabins. And a lot of those kids there have sickle cell and or secondary diagnoses as well. And in the right, I was DJing for the Pittsburgh Marathon, and we were celebrating healthy living and getting out there and just having a great time, and I was partnered with Lululemon. Shout out to my fiance for getting that gig.
Okay. So as a community psychologist, I've been hearing about and learning about engagement for quite some time. However, I will say that it can often be intimidating, even if you are learning about it in courses or in classes or you're hearing these type of meetings and presentations, it can be intimidating. We are going to be talking about things from a very big picture, and I encourage people to learn more, speak to others to learn more, as well as looking into more about the curriculum that they're developing that's providing more specifics. So I want to start off with some definitions. So what we mean by engagement and people with lived experience. So a person with lived experience is an individual who is directly affected by a condition or the research topic, as well as by the strategies that aim to address them. And what I mean by strategies can be the interventions and could be the policies within the healthcare system or the policies more broadly, as well as our research. People with lived experience are people with knowledge based on their background, their experiences, their personal intersecting identities, as well as their perspectives. And this goes beyond their education and training. And by engagement, we're thinking about working authentically and collaboratively with people with lived experience and communities to address issues that are affecting their lives. And I talk about engagement in terms of with people with experience, but also communities, because as I said, I've really thought about and have been trained to think about what that means broadly, and I'll talk more about that. And this engagement leads to us understanding the community's needs, involving them in decisions, and then taking action to improve their lives collaboratively. And I want to make a distinction between engagement in this way as from engagement in clinical trials. So within clinical trials, we're usually focusing on a metric. We're working on ensuring that individuals enrolled in the study stay informed, active, and adherent with the goal of improving participant recruitment, retention, and the data quality. However, in engagement, we're talking about working with people who have that expertise based on their lived experience and background, and we're really thinking about that throughout the entire research life cycle. So when we talk about key partners, we're starting off by thinking about people with lived experience. And the way that we may identify people to engage with could be through community-based organizations. It could also be through maybe people who previously participated in your research. This could also be through connections that you make in various settings. So we start off with that. To me, we want to think about other people who also may be key partners. That can be caregivers and families, as they are also impacted in this entire family unit. It can be healthcare professionals and clinicians, community-based organizations, community engagement teams, like the ones you may have that are at your universities that are really thinking about how do we effectively engage with people with lived experience in communities who are affected. We may be thinking about funding, federal funding agencies as well as private foundations. But then we want to be even more creative when we're thinking about key partners, people who would care about the research and the work that we do. That can be hospital leadership, insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, health policymakers, public health agencies, and the public and media. Again, we want to be creative in thinking about all the different people who may be invested and who may be impacting our research and the outcomes and how we're able to then implement and disseminate this work. So in terms of engagement, it is across a continuum in terms of the communication as well as the level of collaboration. And so the work can be all the way from just more so informing people with lived experience in the communities to having them actually lead the work, them driving it, them generating the ideas, and us being supportive and helping them to implement their ideas. And so what I mean by this is that for inform, that would be the researchers sharing information with the community. They can consult, which is where the researchers are seeking feedback from the community on aspects of the research. So asking them specifically about their study aims, and is it relevant? Do they care about this? Talking about the procedures, is this something that sounds feasible for the community? We can have them participate where the community is involved in key phases of the research, so they can be involved in helping to think about how we're recruiting participants, how we're collecting the data, what are we using in these processes. We can then initiate where the community is actually bringing the problem to the researchers and saying, this is what we want to focus on, this is what we want to address in this research project. And then, as I said before, the community can be the ones who are actually leading the efforts and the decision-making of the research. And all of this work can be helpful for some different agencies like PCORI. They're going to want you to do more of this from participate, initiate to lead, where it's going to be more potentially empowering for the community. But some people may also be doing more that's more collaborative in these more early stages of the engagement. Again, we want to think about potential engagement across the research life cycle. We want to start off with an engagement plan. So before you even start connecting with people with lived experience in the community to engage, you want to actually come up with a plan. So you want to think about all these things from the very beginning. Then you want to think about it with the research question and proposals. So you want to seek feedback from the community to develop the relevant research questions that will address true community needs. So you want to start off by asking them what's important, seeking their feedback. You want to get a sense of what's a priority for the community, what has already been done, and as was said earlier, you're able to gain insight outside of academic spaces and learn more about the important work that is actually being done by the community. You can then work with the community on study startup, inviting key partners to lend their expertise and lived experience to enhance the study design and outcomes, getting a sense of what you have planned. Is it feasible? Will you actually be able to recruit people? Will they be turned off, or will they think that the methods and the procedures you're using are acceptable? And I want to note that people with lived experience, whenever you're developing the study, have a lot of talent and skills. So that's another thing that has been pointed out to me, that you might be able to collaborate with a person with lived experience who's a graphic designer. things that is just really enhancing the research process and your research overall. Then they can help with data collection and analysis, so leveraging the community partnerships and network to bolster your recruitment and retention. They may be connecting you with new community-based organizations, new people who are interested in your work. And then they also can help with the results, dissemination, and translation. So they can help with both being a part of their traditional academic writing, so with presentations and manuscripts, as well as thinking about how do you reach that lay audience, the general public that we've been talking about, who we want to actually connect with, who we want to actually learn the results of our research. And then lastly, working with community partners can help to impact and call to action. So synthesizing all these lessons learned and refine new steps through continued partnership and thinking about what next steps you want to take with those individuals and communities.
So, why is engagement important? I think we've been hearing a lot about that throughout this whole, conference on why engaging with people with lived experiences is important. Building relationships and trust is vital to, engaging with whatever target community you're trying to work with. Being able to obtain, you'll be able to obtain new insights about the community that you're working with, and you'll be able to strengthen the ability to conduct the research that you're actually looking into. And it actually makes your research and solutions more relevant and useful. Ways in which I engage are with my nonprofits, and I also like to do my own research on where I can be of use as far as how I can help out in any way. On the left here, that's me. I was a peer navigator at the time, and we had a nonprofit fundraiser called Swing for Sickle Cell, and we had a bunch of people come out from the community, golfers, celebrities from the football teams, and also just other people with sickle cell and their families come out and engage in a great time with food. And I got to meet so many other warriors like myself and ask them the questions, what do you go through on a daily basis? Or how can I connect with them on ways in which me as a peer navigator can help them in turn, do better in school or do better just so they can survive the summer. In the middle here, I talked a little bit about it before, but camp. The camp I talked about was Flying Horse Farms, which I recommend you all look up. It's a camp for kids with serious illnesses, and each week in the summer, they actually serve different diagnoses. So I was a seasonal staff member, so I got to see every one of these diagnoses, from mental health week to rheumatology, GI, hematology, oncology, facial cranial anomalies, and rare diseases. Siblings camp, because that's just as important as, with families, you're dealing with the whole family. It's not just the individual that's affected. So being at this camp, the engagement that I found was immeasurable. I was able to spend a whole residential camp session with these campers and learn about, their individual needs, what they're like with their families, and how that truly helped me was it just helped so much, because I was able to take that information back to, Children's Sickle Cell Foundation and tell them, little Jimmy, he actually told me he was struggling in school because he had to wait at the bus stop for 2 months, or 2 hours for a bus. So how can we get him to either get a ride share so he doesn't have to wait in that cold, which is a problem for an individual with sickle cell? How can we get them the help they need in that way? So I wouldn't have found that information if I didn't talk to him or build that rapport with him on a one-on-one basis. Sometimes it takes that extra step of not just, talking to them at a clinic or talking to them in a space that's medical. Sometimes we need to engage with our friends and our families and our potential, participants in a way that's very authentic and very natural, so we could just open up to them and they can, and share a little bit about us before just, prying into, what they're like and what you're trying to get out of them. And that leads me into my next slide, which is Todd's top 5 tips for engaging with the community. One is identify your local community-based organizations. And if you don't have any community-based organizations that are local, look nationally. They are there, I promise. And, that's just the first step. Find out where you can, make ground as far as, how you can contribute in your own way. 2, attend those locally local community events or national events as your authentic self. And what I mean by that is, yes, you are a researcher, you are a doctor, you are something in the medical field, and that's okay. Please share with us why you're here. Let us know. But at the same time, you are someone other than that. You're a person. You all have unique stories, and we would also love to hear about that as well. And in turn, that might actually help with, us opening up or sharing a little bit more about us or our families. And hopefully that will in turn help with your research. And then 3, treating people like humans, not their diagnoses. Too many times in my field, working as a person with lived experience, I've seen on both sides how people in the medical field can only know how to identify as someone with sickle cell as just a person with sickle cell, not that's Todd with sickle cell or that's so-and-so. We are not our diagnoses. We are people first, and we have unique stories. And it means a lot when, we're treated as that first and not the diagnoses. 4, asking questions to learn more about the community and the individual. So ask questions, and of course that's a big part of our lives here, but that's when we're in the engagement portion. Ask questions about them that might not pertain specifically to medicine or their diagnoses. What's their favorite movie? How can you connect with them on a different realm or a different topic before to where you're able to help them open up and be more supportive of what you guys are trying to help them with as well. And then, of course, number 5, which I think is probably the most important one that leads into all of them, is it is okay to be transparent. In the medical field, I've seen far too many people, medical professionals, that just want to know it all. Or, if they don't know the answer, I don't even know. It's just like they just shut down, and then they need to find it themselves. But it is okay not to know the answer, and, find that answer with the person with lived experience or the person you're working with. It's okay to say, what, I don't know that, but maybe we could find that answer together. Or I don't know that, but I know a great individual that I can get that information from. Can I get back to you? And sometimes I go so much further because as a person with lived experience, we have dealt with too many people who, have egos or are arrogant and want to be so successful rather than have the best outcome for me as a person with lived experience or going through chronic pain. So I just always want to heighten that. Just be transparent, be yourself, be authentic, and those are my top 5 tips.
Okay, so we're going to talk about sickle cell disease as well as just general chronic pain projects as an example. So I want to highlight a little bit of my work, which spans local, national, international work in terms of me really getting into engagement. I want to note that I am an early career scientist, and so I am only in my 2nd year as faculty, and so this is something that I'm really developing and it's evolving over time. But overall, my work involves working with the community in terms of development, the startup, the data analysis, the dissemination of my findings, as well as advocacy, so across that life cycle that I talked about. So at the local level, one of the ways in which I've been able to develop my engagement plans and strategies and work is just showing up for things like presenting at a workshop. And so in Pittsburgh, I presented at the Community Wellness Initiative, and I provided a managing pain workshop. And that was an opportunity for me to share more about coping and living with pain, actually just general pain, without it being a research setting, without it even being clinical. So I just had the opportunity to share more information about it and to hear the stories of people in the community. I also have had the opportunity to connect with people in the Children's Sickle Cell Foundation, which, as Todd said, is the local community-based organization that's focused on sickle cell disease and sees people across their life course. And I've just showed up to community events, to their back to school bash, to their Kennywood Day, which is an amusement park. And that's where I was able to talk to Todd, meet Todd's fiance, just like have a good time. But that was building connections and partnership, as well as then actually giving back to them without expecting something in return. So I presented at like the support group or the lunch and learn and just sharing what they really wanted to hear about. And it seems that the community has actually been interested in hearing more about mental health and not necessarily in a clinical setting or in a research setting. And what I want to note is a lot of times it can be a little bit intimidating or nerve-wracking going into these settings. You may be going alone, you don't really know anyone. That's okay. Show up uncomfortable. They're uncomfortable when they're going to the hospital, to the clinic, so we can practice being uncomfortable and getting out of our safe space. I also had the opportunity to hear from many people as a part of the Pittsburgh CTSI, which is the Clinical and Translational Science Institute. They held an engagement studio where I had about 6 people living with sickle cell disease come and provide feedback on a study that I was planning, that I was going to be presenting as a part of my Career Development Award to the NIH, and I received amazing, outstanding feedback. And then as I've worked on developing materials for various studies, I've heard from sickle cell disease warriors, their family members, clinicians. I also was able to get feedback from the K-12 Personal Lived Experience panel, and they helped inform multiple projects as well as, again, an application for a Career Development Award, so really engaging with them across multiple steps. I also was able to work with an interdisciplinary team to get feedback on different aspects. So like Todd, I also heard from other people lived experience. Siblings, I was able to hear from a nurse, an engineer, so also people in different disciplines. And then going more national, so really stepping outside of just Pittsburgh to connect with people at the national level. So I also connected with people at the Maryland Sickle Cell Disease Association, again, showing up to just share personally about the study, because sometimes they just receive an email or they may see a flyer, but I actually showed up to personally tell people who are part of the community-based organization about it, so they also had the opportunity to ask questions. They learned a little bit more about me and who I am and my intentions and my purpose and my aims. I also then presented to that group as a part of a support group or like more of like a lunch and learn on self-advocacy as well as advocacy on the Capitol Hill. So really sharing my knowledge. And this actually led to the opportunity to present at another national conference, which is the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America, which is a conference where it's more facing towards individuals living with sickle cell disease, their families, and less so academic. And so again, I was able to make more connections through that. And they asked me to present, and I presented with these individuals here, these are people that are part of the community. One of them, their child has sickle cell disease. Another one is a chaplain. So actually connecting with another discipline and hearing their perspective. And then I was able to connect with nurses and other people from other backgrounds, as well as to see about innovation. So they have, in Georgia, they developed a center that provides holistic care for people with sickle cell disease, and it was one of the first of its kind. And as I continue to do more and more research, people have brought that up. And I had the opportunity to get into the community, so I actually knew what they were talking about, and I knew how wonderful this actual center is. And then going to these conferences actually led to international opportunities. So when I was at the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America conference, I met an individual who's living with sickle cell disease who's originally from Uganda. And he felt passionate about better understanding stigma in Uganda. And we just started having a conversation, and we were able to start to have a monthly meeting where it was him and I, and really he was taking the lead. I'm hearing what does he want to see. We're going to actually try to validate a stigma scale in Uganda, and we're talking about the importance of the culture and the context and how we might modify it. And we're talking about what are our various roles, but really having him take the lead and just figuring out how I can be supportive and helpful. And then I also had the opportunity to meet someone at IASP who was in the Netherlands, who was a postdoctoral student, and she was interested in studying more social determinants of health, and she's been incredibly thoughtful about power dynamics and thinking about how can she engage with people with lived experience. And so our process has been thinking about our positionality, thinking about starting that before we even go into other steps of the study. We then talked about the data, the ongoing data that she has going on, and what are the specific variables, and getting feedback from a person with lived experience. They're working together to actually write the manuscript, and I'm leading as the senior author. So for me, my work in this first 2 years as faculty, I've been doing community engagement across the entire life course, but on different projects. And I think I want to just highlight that it might not be as linear as we expect. This is an iterative process in which you're just really learning and maybe engaging with communities in different ways. I'm constantly learning from just this different work. And then we want to highlight an example of a specific sickle cell disease study, which is the peer support for adolescents and emerging adults with sickle cell disease pain. And this is the work that Todd is a part of. And so my mentor, he's developed a digital CBT intervention, but this is special in that this intervention involves people being connected with peers, where they have the space to talk to people living with sickle cell disease or either a family member so they're more knowledgeable about the condition. And now we can have Todd talk more about it. But in this work, he engaged with community-based organizations from the beginning. He worked with them to develop the digital intervention. He developed a community advisory board, and he recruited people with lived experience to be the health coaches who are actually a part of the intervention in the project. And then also hired multiple people who with lived experience to be a part of the research team, which is how Todd became involved. And so I'm not sure if we have time, but we wanted to do a Q&A with Todd, where I wanted to hear more about his journey in terms of becoming involved. Maybe let's skip past this one, and I want to hear more tell me about your experience as a health coach on the present study.
Yeah, hello, there we go, sorry. On Presence, I use my shared experience as a health coach to offer a safe space for individuals living with sickle cell to be vulnerable, to share their stories and work with them with the tools that they are provided with CBT to develop SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-based goals so that they can potentially, build that self-efficacy to live well with sickle cell and to, go through whatever they're going through, because it is very, very participant-led. We want them to be able to live the lives that they want. So as a health coach, really, I play a big part in offering that safe space like I was talking about before. And it really does help when I have a commonality with this individual and they are sharing how their pain affects them, and I can connect with that. And then we talk a little bit about that. We don't harp on the negative part, but okay, you know what? I feel exactly how you're feeling. What can we do to better support you and move forward? So let's build a SMART goal. And those are tools that we use to help individuals start building their own self-efficacy to, solve these issues on their own. So when they're out of the program, out of the study, they're able to live well with sickle cell without the need of a health coach. They can start doing this more independently. So this was my first year being a health coach. However, I was a peer navigator before, but as a health coach now, it's more data retention or, taking more notes, different things like that. It's been really awesome and amazing getting to meet people on a national scale, since it's a multi-site trial, and being able to meet people with sickle cell from other parts of the state, from other parts of other states, and it's really awesome. So that's what I have about, health coaching.
Thank you. And then, so what I'm really trying to highlight is the different roles that Todd has had. So as a part of this trial, he has been a health coach. He has been a part of the advisory board, as well as he is a person who's joined the research team. And so can you tell us a little bit more about what it's been like as a person with lived experience who's on the research team, maybe specifically 2 things that you've learned as a part of this, being on the team?
Yeah, definitely. Being on the research team is great because I'm able to see, I think the biggest thing is I'm able to, as an individual with lived experience, I'm able to go back to my community and tell them all the different work that you guys are doing. What Tom said particularly, it really stuck with me because I see both sides. I can value with that when there's individuals with sickle cell that have had a struggle. Really, they've struggled all their lives with people not trusting them, believing in them, and I've been able to express that to the research team and to the community on how much work you guys are doing. So being able to do that has been awesome, but being on the research team, I'm able to take my experience and almost help them cut corners as far as, I'm right on the team, I have sickle cell, I'm gonna tell you right now, that ain't gonna work. They're not gonna like that, or something like that. For an example, the study questionnaire, when you're for eligibility, it had multiple questions. So they just changed the format on how things were worded or how things were structured, and just that little change helped out But being on the research team is amazing because I'm able to add my input and work with the PIs on a personal level and to add those unique things that an individual for this study might specifically want as an individual with sickle cell.
And then one of the other things we often hear about is advisory boards, but many people may not have an advisory board, or they're not really sure how to start an advisory board or what it should look like. Tell us maybe what a typical advisory board meeting looks like for you.
Yeah, for sure. Good. Real quick, advisory boards are awesome. You can take them from my 5 tips. Maybe look at your non-profit organizations or people that are in the community. It can be built of people with lived experiences, people in their families, doctors and or researchers like yourselves that are involved in those communities. But the big thing is bringing them together and making sure you're hearing from that person with lived experience or their community, what their needs are. So when you're in these advisory meetings, you can bring that work back to your team and really make strides in the work that you're doing rather than trying to figure out, oh, I think this is going to work and I think this is what they want. And you're researching something that has nothing to really benefit. Like we said before, people go through research all their lives and don't benefit people with chronic pain. We don't want that. We want people on the advisory boards to be, in person, engage with their communities and being able to support the advisory board. So we meet once every month on the 3rd Wednesday of the month, and we just come together. The first thing we do is we just break bread and just share about what's going on in our lives. So, and know that too, being on an advisory board, you come to learn about these people and who they are. And even though we're all work focused, we are people first, like I said. So always make sure you relish in that and that you are all people and we're trying to build towards something common and good.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So just to wrap up, people with lived experience have expertise based on their background and experiences. Consider multiple key partners, including people with lived experience, their families, clinicians. Engaging with people with lived experience strengthens the science and its relevance, the feasibility of our work. And then as you start to engage with communities, be open and flexible during this iterative engagement process. And then one of the things that a few things that I didn't highlight that I just want to say at the end is make sure we pay people for their expertise in their work, right? So make sure to pay people. And I also think it's incredibly important to be mindful of power dynamics as well. So before you even engage with the community, reflect. And as you continue to engage with them, continue to reflect and grow. All right, and then here's resources. CTSIs, I know we have one at Pitt, but also learned a lot from the Penn State one. PCORI has many resources as well as NIH. Thank you.